Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Adam Clater, the Chief Architect at Red Hat. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Right on, well, welcome. Just to dive into things here, what should agencies keep in mind as they're moving more of their data and more of their infrastructure to the cloud?
Yeah, data's a tough one because data has gravity. And so there's certainly a need for applications to have proximity to that data. And so as you start to move more of your data into one particular cloud provider, you may find that more of your applications are going to follow that data with them. And so I think that you need to have an understanding of how you're moving your data, where you're going to put that data, and then have some sort of data access mechanism. Usually we see agencies building API layers around their data so they can access that from any cloud as they need to.
Obviously, there are going to be some bumps along the way as agencies figure this out. What are some of those common bottlenecks, or what are some of those common pain points that agencies run into when they are going about their cloud migration?
Yeah, so we've got cloud transit fees, right? So if you're bringing data into the cloud, that's free, but getting your data back out of your cloud, there may be some costs associated with that. So you need to think pretty carefully about where that data ends up. As you move applications into the cloud, though, there's a couple of different approaches that folks can take. Now, obviously, we've seen for a very long time agencies doing a lift and shift, where you just pick your application up, you move it into the cloud, and you drop it into that cloud provider, and you're kind of mission accomplished, which is okay. And in fact, sometimes there's some really compelling reasons why you'd want to do that. You may have a data center lease, or you may have other budgetary things that are really causing you to do that. Oftentimes, though, that looks a little bit more like a managed services provider contract with that cloud provider than really using the cloud. There is an operation or an opportunity to optimize those applications, though, as you move them into the cloud and use those cloud native technologies. It can be difficult, and there's a lot of refactoring of applications that needs to happen when you do that. The good news is we've seen a lot of advances in technologies like Kubernetes and things like Istio and service meshes that are making it much easier to do some of those migrations within your own data center to start with. And then you can make a decision. Well, do I want to move this off of my platform within my data center into a cloud provider A or B or C, whichever one makes the most sense for your mission? Or is this something that needs to actually go out to the edge, right? So we're looking at new capabilities for agencies at the edge. And building on that common platform is going to make it a lot easier to make that decision of wherever that workload needs to go.
Well, just to zoom out here a little bit, let's maybe discuss a little bit of the value proposition of why agencies are doing this in the first place. What do they hope to achieve by making this cloud migration possible and having more of their data at their fingertips?
Yeah, it's not always more cost effective to move to the cloud. I think we've all sort of learned that over the course of the last few years. And in fact, that's why we've seen things go from cloud first to cloud smart, right? If you're going to cloud, be smart about how you're going to do it. But I think that agencies gain an immense amount of flexibility. And so when we think about sort of the demand cycles that agencies may have, the seasonality of interaction from their customers, it can make a lot of sense to not own all of that iron inside of your data center in order to reach that maximum capacity need, when the reality is for 9 months out of the year, you only need a third of that. So the ability to burst and sort of scale dynamically has really been valuable to agencies. So I think that's one of the major things. I think the other side of it, in addition to scaling to the capacity needs, is that we're able to sort of marshal and address resources as an agency much, much faster in the cloud than if they were our legacy infrastructure that we may have had. I mean, if you can imagine, back in the day, it was, I need to order a server, I need to rack and stack it, hook it up, ping power pipe. Just to get it to that point could take 90 days to 6 months just to get a server on the floor. Then you've got to get your application infrastructure deployed on it, and then your developers can start being productive. So with things like virtualization and cloud technology, we went from a 6 to 9 months lag to 6 to 9 days, or maybe even 6 to 9 hours of being able to have those developers productive. So I think that's the other side that's been really important, because the reality is the consumer of these government services, you and I and everybody else, has an expectation of them that they're going to be much closer to what we use on an everyday basis, right? Whether it be Facebook or Amazon or whatever tool you use every day to get things done in your life, you expect your government to respond the same. And so the government's had to play a little bit of catch up, but they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Following up on that point, we've seen some agencies maybe further along that curve than others. There are some agencies that still have plenty of on-premise data centers. Some have a more compelling reason than others. Some might have some sensitive data, think about the intelligence community, et cetera. But how do you, manage that challenge for some agencies that are, again, kind of lower on that learning curve?
Yeah, it starts with like understanding your data. We started this conversation with data, but that's really where it starts. You have to understand your data and the impact of having that data in those different security levels, whether you're in the Department of Defense or whether you're looking to move something into a commercial cloud provider like with FedRAMP. And so it starts with knowing and understanding your data, and then you can begin to move those applications and understand them. Listen, there are technologies and there are data that I think are always going to be in either a government or outsourced sort of private data center. And then there are some that are always going to live in the cloud. And I think it's a bit of a pendulum, like everything in life. And so cloud first certainly drove us very, very hard to let's get in the cloud. And think about the amazing things that so many agencies have done. They moved their video conferencing, which was crucial for COVID. They moved their email, they moved their collaboration tools, document management. A lot of that stuff now just completely lives in the cloud, and you wouldn't think of doing it any other way. So that's really good. Other things on that pendulum are sometimes coming back into the data center. We are seeing repatriation of workloads into internal clouds because that's what financially or for mission makes the most sense. I think it's like everything. It's just going to be a continual sort of walk down that path. Things are going to ebb and flow, but it's largely going to be driven by mission needs.
Yeah, and to that point about mission needs, we were talking earlier about how cloud allows these agencies to scale to their capacity, scale to their mission. One thing we've seen that's really fast moving is this idea of AI, automation. Agencies are doing more of this. How do you see their cloud infrastructures enabling this fast moving technology?
AI is super exciting. There's a lot of buzz around AI right now, which is good. But there's also a lot of buzz around AI right now, which can be bad. And so I think it's difficult for agencies to get clarity and understanding of what is AI for me? How am I going to use it? What's most important about AI, I could go into ChatGPT and I could ask ChatGPT about things that are very well publicly known. I could ask it about, tell me about Abraham Lincoln, and it would write me a postdoc on Abraham Lincoln, right? But if I said, help me understand securities fraud and what that looks like, that might be a little more difficult. Now, there's an army of people at the Securities and Exchange Commission who understand what securities fraud looks like. And so what we need to do, and what agencies need to do, is kind of take that knowledge that they have, this really valuable knowledge that they have within their agencies, and help get that into a model that they can then use to help them with analysis. So that's the idea of getting domain-specific learning and skills into an AI model, so you can actually leverage it against the data that you have, that you've built up, and then use that to move forward. And I think that's the leap right now that a lot of agencies are finding. It's cool to have a chatbot that knows about your documents and can tell people where to find the documents they need to file. That's really exciting. But really affecting mission outcomes like that is going to take a little bit more time. And that, to me, is what's really exciting and sort of where we're looking at Red Hat.
Yeah. And finally, I'd be remiss without bringing up security. And as that landscape of what the network looks like changes, that the security considerations are going to change as well. What should agencies be keeping an eye out for as they're going about all this modernization?
Yeah, so there's been, we've had executive memos, we've had a lot of content out of CISA around zero trust. And zero trust is definitely sort of the future of where things are going from a security perspective. I think things to keep in mind about zero trust is that there is no single product that's going to zero trust your entire environment, right? It's going to be it's going to start with data analysis, just like going into the cloud. So at some point, you're going to have to get down there and do that analysis of your data and figure out who needs to have access to it, who shouldn't, and how they should be accessing it. That journey starts in many cases with a single step, right? And the good news is that a lot of agencies already have a PIV card on their hip or their CAT card within the Department of Defense. And it's about, well, how do I get that identity from that card into the infrastructure and then carry that with me to other places so that I can really assert who I am via this device, not just via my username and password. And so that's the first step for a lot of agencies. We're working with a lot of them in moving that forward. Then after that, it's network elements and really applications and servers identifying themselves on the network. So it's really shaped around this concept of identity and getting that through. And then once I know who you are and what you ought to be doing, I can determine whether or not I'm going to allow you to access this resource.
All right, Adam, well, all great points here, but I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank today's guest, Adam Clater, the Chief Architect at Red Hat. I'm reporter Jory Heckman, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Cloud Exchange.